Michael's story. 1. Suppose you wanted to kill someone. That would be easy. There are lots of ways. But suppose you wanted to kill 4 people, all in the same house, all within moments of one another, and you chose to use a knife. That could help eliminate the noise, but it would require skill, strength, and patience. Murder is hard work, especially if people fight back. Then there's the really big hurdle. You want to get away with it. You're determined to stab 4 people living in a single home in the still of the night, and then disappear without leaving a clue to your identity. Now that's a more difficult challenge. But you did it. The perfect crime. Michael Kohberger woke up early to check on the weather, but instead learned about the shooting. It was not long after dawn on December 15, 2022, the big Kansas sky still gray and solemn, and his night's sleep had been fitful. He felt out of sorts, a complaint he'd continually make as the days ticked down to Christmas, but he blamed his unease on all the travel. It was an explanation that made good sense. In the hectic span of little more than a week, Michael, a graying 67-year-old who had already started to feel the aches and pains of his senior years, had been shuffling through a disruptive flutter of time zones as he made his way back and forth across nearly the entire width of the country. Just 5 days earlier, he'd flown in harsh sunshine from Philadelphia to Seattle, then caught a twin-engine Embraer E-170 jet for the 1-hour or so shuttle flight into a dark, frigid Pullman, Washington, Moscow, Idaho regional airport. There was a long walk from the plane to the squat, single-story terminal, and the evening cold hit him like a punch. It was a lonely, desolate outpost, and particularly so when gripped by the long shadows of the northwest winter. The runway had been bulldozed out of the vast dune-like hills of the Idaho Palouse, and the matchbox-sized airport was the only sign of civilization in a rutted, lunar-like landscape that spread into the distance toward a foreboding wall of amber mountains. But Bryan, his 28-year-old son, had, as promised, been there to meet him, and from the airport it was just a 12-minute drive, if the roads weren't slick with frost, to Bryan's apartment across the state line in Pullman, Washington. To his doting father's pride, Bryan had just finished his first semester as a PhD candidate in criminal justice at Washington State University, an accomplishment that, to any objective eye, was an academic success story. Bryan had been a mediocre student at a hardscrabble high school in blue-collar Pocono Valley, Pennsylvania, where Michael had been the maintenance man. Upon graduation, he stumbled, without any real interest, into a local community college. But then, as if by magic, once he started his college coursework, a long-submerged burst of ambition and focus rose up. He did well enough to transfer to nearby DeSales University, an institution firmly Jesuit and rigorous where, after earning a BA in psychology, he switched to criminal justice and received his master's. Then, with the support and encouragement of his DeSales professors, he was accepted into Washington State University's nationally acclaimed doctoral program. It was the same prestigious university where Michael's sister-in-law, his older brother Clement's wife, had impressed the family by getting a degree in psychology. For Michael, who had never gone to college, this was an astonishment. He had grown up in the rough-and-tumble city streets on the industrial periphery of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where his father had also been a maintenance man. The fact that his son was well on his way to a doctorate, Dr. Bryan Christopher Kohberger was how he was already referring to him in a conversation with a mechanic at a local garage just days before he flew to Seattle, was a cause for immense pride. Things he could only have dreamed of would be accomplished by his son. And it was a future that seemed even more remarkable when Michael allowed himself to look back at the painful tumult of Bryan's teenage years. Complicated. That was the tactful euphemism that Marianne, his wife for nearly 4 decades, would finally settle on when talking about their son. But Marianne was, Michael knew, always more gentle, always more outwardly caring to their 2 older daughters and young Bryan than he was. And after all, patience was part of her job. She was a diligent paraprofessional working with special needs pupils in the Pennsylvania school district where he was the janitor. Yet for Michael, he'd frankly acknowledged to relatives all he had gone through with the boy had thrown him for a loop. It was not just that he had been unprepared to raise such a troubled child, but the cascade of problems were of a sort that was more than he could fathom. He rejoiced that it was all